Hello guys, it's me, Greed here. Greed here. Oh, it's Greed here. Today I want to talk about win rates and pick rates, especially because of the release of the Overwatch stat website, where you can go and look at the hero stats. Now, first things first, I want to clear up. I actually think the stats on the website are wrong, because if you look at the Grandmaster stats, a lot of them don't make any sense. Like, Mercy's got a 0% win rate and stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the stats are not correct, but that's fine, because I don't actually need the correct stats to make the point that I'm talking about. So, what I'm talking about is that win rates and pick rates don't actually mean anything. They're not a very good metric to balance off of, and they're honestly even a worse metric to even begin to understand why things are strong, or even in what way things are strong, because they don't give you the relevant context or information required in order to deduce actual hero strength, like you would be from actually being able to, say, analyze the game or look at it to a higher depth, more so than just raw numbers. And a good example of this would be a character like Freya. Here in Ranked, she's got a 5.5% pick rate and a 46.2% win rate. Now, obviously, these are not good stats. It means Freya's not getting picked very often, and it also means that when she is getting picked, she's losing more than she's winning. Now, obviously, to the average player, when they're looking at that, they're going to look at those stats and say, well, that's a low pick rate and that's a low win rate, therefore, Freya must be a weaker character. So all the high-level players complaining about Freya's existence and saying that Freya is overpowered are clearly wrong, because the stats show that Freya isn't very good. Now, this is a completely normal take to have if you're just purely looking at win rates and pick rates to deduce actual hero strength or impact on the game, because these stats are basically irrelevant. They mean nothing other than at the massive extremes. Unless someone has like an 80% win rate, there is really no reason to even consider these to be good balancing metrics at all. Now, obviously, if you understand this game basically at all, you already know that Freya has a pretty bad win rate and pretty bad pick rate, as I've shown, but are also the best DPS in the entire game right now, and their stats simply don't represent that. Why is Freya the best DPS in the game? Well, firstly, it's her lethality, her mobility, and her survivability options. There are no characters in the game that are able to do what Freya does, where she is consistently able to output massive amounts of burst damage to her degree with her spam shots, as well as the ability to stay alive as simple as it is for her, and the ability to get around the map as effectively as it is for her. There are no characters in the game that are able to output that similar value as Freya is able to. So, if Freya is as good as I say she is, if she is as overpowered as I say she is, how is it that her win rate and her pick rate are very low? Well, these are good questions, obviously. You can't just say that these are bad balancing metrics and not explain why. So let's explain why. First of all, Freya is banned a lot. She's likely to be one of the most banned heroes in the entire game, which is obviously why her pick rate is going to be lower, because she's banned so often. Another reason that her win rate is lower is because she's obviously going to be banned more often, where people are less likely to be able to get playtime on her, people are less likely to be able to play her. Therefore, her stats are obviously going to be lower, because players are going to be naturally worse at the game because they have less time to play the character due to the fact that they are banned more. Now, this happens to every character. Every hero is going to be affected by outside influence. They're going to be affected by things that you're never going to be able to understand without deeper context and knowledge of the game, which proves that win rates and pick rates are not a sustainable way to look at character strength, because of the lack of context. They do not actually represent the strength of the hero, and looking at them as if they did represent the strength of the hero is very dangerous, because you end up getting in a kind of limbo area, a purgatory area, you could say, where you're assuming hero strength based off of these stats that are actually affected by things that you don't understand. Therefore, you make unhealthy decisions and balance changes for the game out of pure misunderstanding. Now, a good example of this would be a character like Lucio. Lucio has undergone a lot of changes over the years, whether that be buffs or nerfs, because of the fact that he's always remained as a relatively strong character, especially in high-level play, but generally in general. And a lot of people would look at his old win rate stats in the higher ranks, or perhaps even in professional play, and say, hey, look, Lucio's win rate and pick rate is X. That must mean he's actually pretty good, and he should probably get a nerf. And it comes into the fact that people do not understand why that may be. For example, Lucio's got a natural synergy with more Brawl or Rush tanks, things like Ramatra, things like Reinhardt, and so on. And it may be the case that Reinhardt is okay that season, not great, but okay, and Lucio's also okay, and then that ends up creating a synergy so strong that they work so well together that they end up becoming the meta to be ran together, even if they're not technically represented to be the strongest support or tank in the game based off their win rates or pick rates, because maybe people aren't picking Reinhardt because he's only playable with a Lucio at that moment, and if you don't get your Lucio, then you're not going to play him. Therefore, his pick rate is naturally going to be represented as lower, and the people that are forcing him without a Lucio are naturally going to be losing more because he requires one to be played well. Therefore, his win rate is going to be lower, and some people just can't synergize well together, meaning that sometimes when the two characters are played together, they still end up losing, thus hurting their win rate and pick rates even more, because people are less likely to pick them if they're still losing even on a good combo. Meaning that although their win rate and pick rate may look bad, or it might even look normal, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is the case, because there are so many outside influences and so much missing context that means you're not able to derive proper hero strength from it. Let's take another look at a different character, and I want you to tell me, purely based on the win rate and pick rate, whether the character is strong, weak, normal, or try to explain the context behind the numbers purely based off the numbers themselves. Now, let's take a look at Roadhog. 5.9% pick rate, 41% win rate. Those are pretty abysmal looking stats. If you were just purely going off win rate and pick rate here, you'd probably assume this character needs a little bit of love. But is that what you pulled from that? Are you looking at those numbers and assuming that he is weak? Why is he weak? Can you tell? What buff does the character need to change those stats around? If you're saying, I don't really know, that's a good thing, because you shouldn't know based on these numbers, because these numbers don't actually tell you anything. It doesn't tell you if the hook is weak, it doesn't tell you if the breather is weak, it doesn't tell you if his left click or his right click is weak, or his ult is weak, or the synergy is weak, or perhaps the characters getting played are just naturally beating him. Maybe Kiriko's getting banned a lot, and that means that you can't effectively run a Kiriko and they're running Ana, he's getting counterpicked too often. Maybe that's the reason. Maybe Hog's win rate and pick rate are influenced by the fact that maybe Kiriko's a strong character, and because Kiriko is banned more often, it means that you can't play Hog as often, therefore when he is forced, he's doing worse. Now, does that mean he's a worse character, or does that make Ana too broken? Will Hog's win rate be affected if Ana is overpowered? Therefore, because his stats look like that, does that actually mean that Ana is overpowered? Or does that mean that Kiriko's overpowered and they're getting banned too often, which makes it represented that Ana would be overpowered because Kiriko's getting picked less often because they're getting banned more because they're OP? Do you see what I'm saying? How you can't actually understand any hero strength at all from these numbers? They mean nothing. Literally nothing. You cannot derive any information from these numbers alone. Now, are they useful with greater context? Can you look at other numbers? Can you look at other things and say, maybe the pick rate and the win rate be useful in that regard? Absolutely. There are definitely some scenarios where looking at win rate and pick rate are effective tools at understanding problems, or maybe just in general seeing how healthy your game is. Maybe a character that people are saying is really annoying to play against has a really high pick rate, and you're going, well, obviously our player base doesn't enjoy playing against that character. What can we do to make them played slightly less often so that our players are slightly less annoyed by that character? That's a completely relevant stat to look at because it is a direct correlation with the thing you want to fix. Now, does that mean you should necessarily affect the hero's strength because of that? Perhaps not. There are definitely other ways to go about that, but it is at least an argument to understand the fact that, at least if you're going to look at some information, let the information actually be at least relevant to the argument that you're trying to make. Because, again, if we were just going off purely that Hog stats, we'd be buffing Roadhog right now, which is a terrible idea, because Roadhog's actually really good, especially after his revert. Firstly, he has infinitely more skill expression with the left click and the right click, giving him more options. Therefore, if you're better at the game, you're going to be simply doing more on Hog because you have more accessibility to higher ranges and generally higher damage output with the left and the right click because you have more options, and knowing how to use those options is going to reward you better. Secondly, it increases consistency massively because you don't rely on the pick pen to increase your chances of getting a one-shot anymore, meaning that the one-shot is more consistent and it's now based almost entirely off your ability to hit a hook instead of being able to hook someone into your pick pen. Therefore, his consistency's up, his skill expression is higher, his general damage is up, his breather is superior, and obviously his whole hog hasn't changed. Therefore, you would assume this character is a lot stronger than they were before. And he is, because you can actually look at the context of the information being actually represented when you look at a change like that. It's easy to look at a win rate or a pick rate and say, yeah, this hero is X because of Y, but it isn't necessarily the best way to go about it. Now, I know Hog is strong through personal experience, having played him, having played against him, having analyzed him through many games, watching demos back of him being played, understanding the context where he's strong and weak, understanding why he's strong and weak. Why is the one-shot so powerful against certain comps? It's because certain comps want to close the distance on you, and the more you close the distance on a Hog, the more options the Hog has to be able to one-shot someone, because he prefers when people close the distance on him instead of him closing the distance on him, because then he would have to use his breather to escape. Therefore, when people walk towards him, which is why he's better on defense, when people walk towards him, he has a greater chance of actually killing something, because he naturally controls more space and has more options to go on things like flanks and off angles, and doesn't have to fight for those angles as often. Therefore, he's less likely to be countered by something like an Ana, making him stronger on defense. You can go back, you can look at demos, you can analyze, you can coach, and so on, and actually understand why he is strong or why he is weak based off of reality, instead of just looking at the numbers. And that is my specific problem with win rates and pick rates. There is no way to look at a win rate or look at a pick rate and actually understand whether the hero is strong or weak, because that is not what the numbers represent. All they represent is how often they themselves win, they themselves lose, and how often they are picked. Those things are not indicators of hero strength at all. I love you all. I hope you have a great day. Eat some delicious soup. Take a day off. Chill out. I love you. Goodbye. 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 Goodbye.